There's this strange moment that happens when you check your bank account and realize you've saved more than you've ever had before. Not lottery money, not inheritance, just your money. Money you earned, kept, and somehow didn't spend. For most people, that number sits somewhere between $5,000 and $20,000, and it feels significant but also fragile, like you're one car repair away from starting over. And then there's this other number that lives in your head, the one you don't say out loud because it sounds absurd, $1,000,000. That number feels fictional, doesn't it? Like something reserved for people who caught lucky breaks or understood secrets you were never taught. My name is Anderson, and I've spent the better part of a decade watching how money actually moves through people's lives. Not the fantasy version sold in finance books, but the real version where progress is slow, invisible, and easily abandoned. If you've ever wondered why some people seem to escape financial stress while others work just as hard and stay trapped, you're in the right place. Make sure you're subscribed, because what I'm about to walk you through isn't motivational noise. It's the mechanics of how wealth actually builds when you stop thinking in straight lines. Most people imagine financial progress like climbing stairs. You save 10,000, you're 10% closer to 100,000. You save 50,000, you're halfway there. It's neat. It's logical. It's also completely wrong. And this fundamental misunderstanding is why so many people look at their account balance after 3 or 4 years of trying and think, this is pointless. I'll never get there. They're measuring distance when they should be measuring velocity. They're counting steps when they should be watching the ground tilt beneath them. Here's what actually happens, and it's going to sound like I'm exaggerating, but I promise you the math holds up. Once you hit $100,000 in invested assets, you've crossed an invisible threshold that puts you exactly 1/3 of the way to becoming a millionaire. Not 1/10, 1/3. That single milestone represents more progress towards 7 figures than the next $200,000 combined. And if that sounds impossible, it's because you're still thinking in straight lines. Wealth doesn't accumulate the way distances do. It accelerates. Let me show you why this happens. Because understanding the mechanics changes everything about how you approach money. Imagine your financial life as a train leaving a station. At the beginning, you're doing all the work, shoveling coal, building momentum, fighting inertia. Every dollar you save comes directly from your effort, your discipline, your ability to say no when everyone around you is saying yes. The train moves, but it's slow, painfully slow. You're covering ground, but it doesn't feel like enough. This is where most people quit. They look at how far they've come, measure it against how far they still need to go, and decide the math doesn't work. But here's what they miss. Once that train reaches a certain speed, the effort required to maintain momentum drops dramatically. The engine doesn't work harder, it just keeps moving. And somewhere around $100,000, your money stops being a passenger and becomes a second engine. Not a small one, a serious one. At 8% annual returns, which is conservative by historical standards, $100,000 generates $8,000 a year without you doing anything. That's not pocket change. That's a meaningful contribution to your life that keeps working while you sleep, while you work, while you do literally anything else. Now contrast that with someone sitting at $10,000. Same 8% return, they're earning $800 annually from their investments. Still helpful, but not game-changing. The difference between 800 and 8,000 isn't just mathematical, it's psychological. One feels like a nice bonus, the other feels like a force. And once you experience that force working in your favor, your entire relationship with money shifts. You stop seeing saving as sacrifice and start seeing it as leverage. Let's talk about what happens in your head before and after this threshold, because the numbers only matter if you understand the mental shift that accompanies them. Below $100,000, most people operate in what I call survival mode. Not necessarily because they're broke, but because every financial decision carries weight. You want to take a weekend trip, you have to calculate whether it's worth depleting your buffer. Your car makes a strange noise, immediate anxiety about what it might cost. A friend invites you to an expensive dinner. You're doing mental math before you even respond. This isn't poverty, it's precariousness. And precariousness drains your decision making capacity in ways you don't even notice. Above $100,000, something changes. You're not rich, you're not financially independent, but you've built enough of a foundation that individual expenses stop feeling existential. The car repair becomes an annoyance, not a crisis. The dinner invitation becomes a choice, not a threat to your stability. This shift is subtle but profound. When your brain isn't constantly running catastrophic scenarios in the background, you make better decisions about everything: career moves, relationships, health, learning. Mental bandwidth returns, and with it comes the ability to think strategically instead of reactively. Here's where the math starts to feel almost unfair in your favor. Let's say you're investing $500 every month, not an impossible amount, but not trivial either. It takes you roughly 10 years to reach that first 100,000, assuming an 8% average return. 10 years. That's a long time. Long enough to graduate high school and finish college. Long enough for relationships to start and end. Long enough to question whether you're doing the right thing 100 times over. During those 10 years, about 65,000 of that 100,000 comes directly from your contributions. The remaining 35,000, that's compounding doing its quiet work in the background. Now here's the part that breaks people's brains. It takes less than 7 additional years to go from 100,000 to 200,000. Same $500 monthly contribution, same 8% return. But the timeline compresses because your money is now doing more of the heavy lifting. By the time you hit 200,000, you've contributed roughly 104,000 of your own money, which means the other 96,000 came from investment growth. You're still putting in the same effort, but the results are amplifying. And here's the statement that makes people pause and recalculate. At $200,000, you're halfway to a million, not 20% of the way there. Halfway. The reason this works is that wealth compounds exponentially, not linearly. Every dollar of growth generates its own future growth. It's like planting a tree that drops seeds which grow into more trees. The first tree takes years to mature, but once it does, the forest expands faster than you can track. Think about what this means for your actual life. The early years feel like pushing a boulder uphill, exhausting, discouraging, with no guarantee you'll make it to the top. But once you do, gravity reverses. That same boulder starts pulling you forward. The discipline you built during the hard years becomes the foundation for the easier ones. And easier doesn't mean effortless, it means your effort starts producing disproportionate results. By the time you reach the 25-year mark at that same $500 monthly pace, you're sitting on over $500,000. Your contributions total about $150,000. Everything beyond that, $350,000 came from your money working without you. At this stage, your portfolio is generating roughly $40,000 a year in growth. That's not a side hustle. That's a second income that requires 0 hours of your time. The person who understands this dynamic lives differently than the person who doesn't. They don't see $500 a month as a sacrifice. They see it as hiring an employee who works 24 hours a day with no complaints and no salary. They don't view market downturns as disasters. They see them as sales where their contributions buy more shares at discounted prices. They don't panic when their balance dips temporarily because they understand that short-term volatility is the price you pay for long-term growth. Now, let's address the thing nobody wants to hear but everybody needs to understand. The biggest threat to reaching this threshold isn't market crashes or bad luck. It's self-sabotage disguised as reward. You save up $70,000 and suddenly that new car looks reasonable. You hit $90,000 and convince yourself you deserve a lifestyle upgrade because you've been disciplined for so long. You're 6 months from crossing $100,000 and an opportunity comes up to renovate your kitchen, travel for a month, or buy something you've wanted for years. Here's the trap. Spending that money feels like using it. But you're not using it, you're trading it. You're trading the second engine for a temporary experience. You're trading acceleration for consumption. And the cost isn't just the 20,000 you spent. It's the 20,000 you no longer have working for you, plus all the future growth that money would have generated over the next 2 or 3 decades. That kitchen renovation doesn't cost $20,000. It costs 80,000 in future wealth, maybe more. I'm not saying don't ever spend money on things you value. I'm saying understand the exchange rate. A dollar spent today isn't just a dollar, it's every future dollar that original dollar would have created. The people who build wealth internalize this trade-off without becoming miserable about it. They spend on what genuinely matters and ignore the rest. They cut ruthlessly on things that don't improve their lives and invest generously in things that do. But they never, ever confuse consumption with progress. Let's talk about career power, because this is where the invisible benefits of hitting 100,000 start showing up in unexpected ways. When you have no savings, every job feels like a trap you can't escape. Bad boss, toxic environment, underpaid, doesn't matter, you need the paycheck. But once you've built a foundation, your entire posture changes. You're not desperate. You're not scared. You can negotiate harder because walking away is an actual option, not a bluff. And here's the strange part. People can sense this shift in you even if you never mention your savings. Confidence isn't loud. It's quiet, calm, and unmistakable. I've watched this play out dozens of times. Someone builds up 6 figures in savings, and suddenly they start getting promoted, getting better offers, getting opportunities they would have never pursued before. It's not magic, it's leverage. When you're not operating from scarcity, you make better decisions. You take calculated risks, you advocate for yourself, you say no to things that don't serve you. All of this becomes possible not because you're rich, but because you're stable. And stability is the foundation of everything else. This is also why the journey from 0 to 100,000 builds more than wealth. It builds character. The discipline required to consistently invest for a decade while everyone around you is financing lifestyles they can't afford teaches you something essential about delayed gratification. You learn that boring consistency beats exciting gambles. You learn that patience compounds just like interest. You learn to ignore noise and trust process. These aren't just financial lessons, they're life lessons that apply to relationships, careers, health, and everything else that matters. One more thing about the opportunities that emerge at this level: they're invisible to people who haven't reached it. A business partner approaches you with an idea that requires capital. A real estate deal appears that needs a down payment. A career pivot becomes possible because you can afford a temporary pay cut. A friend launches a startup and offers early equity. None of these scenarios exist for someone living paycheck to paycheck, not because they're less capable, but because they lack the financial margin to take advantage of asymmetric opportunities. Wealth creates access, access creates more wealth, and the cycle accelerates. The final piece of this puzzle is recognizing that the same events feel completely different depending on which side of the threshold you're on. Your car breaks down. Below 100,000, it's a crisis that disrupts your budget, drains your emergency fund, and creates stress that lingers for weeks. Above 100,000, it's a problem with a solution. You're not thrilled, but you're not panicked. You handle it and move forward. Same event, completely different emotional experience. Your company announces layoffs. Below the threshold, it's existential terror. Above it, it's an inconvenience that gives you time to find something better. A medical bill arrives. Below, it's a choice between health and stability. Above, it's unpleasant but manageable. This isn't about being rich, it's about having options. And options are what transform life from something that happens to you into something you design. So here's what reaching 100,000 actually means. It means you've proven to yourself that you can build something lasting. It means you've developed the discipline to prioritize future freedom over present consumption. It means you've crossed the point where your money starts working harder than you do. And it means you're not 1/10 of the way to $1 million, you're 1/3 of the way there with momentum on your side and time as your ally. The next 200,000 will come faster than the first 100. The 200 after that will come faster still, not because you'll work harder, but because the foundation you've built will carry more of the weight. The boulder you've been pushing uphill will start pulling you forward. And 30 years from now, when you're looking at a balance with seven figures, you won't remember the coffee you didn't buy or the vacation you postponed. You'll remember the decision to start, the decision to stay consistent, the decision to trust math over emotion. If you haven't started yet, start now. If you're halfway to 100,000, keep going. If you've already crossed it, protect it fiercely and let it do what it's designed to do, multiply. Your future self won't thank you with words. They'll thank you with freedom, options, and a life designed on your terms, and that's worth more than anything you could buy today.